Mm-hmm.
But I think the hardest part for me is not the moving mechanic, but figuring out how to get cars to move from point A to point B once you hear like a siren or the horn blaring coming down the road. So that's probably going to be my hardest part for that.
Okay. Yeah, asset store is definitely handy. Yeah, especially if you have like level design driven games. Yeah, the world building would probably be difficult, but yeah, feel free. I mean, I wouldn't propose buying anything unless you really like that stuff. I mean, just finding things that you can use definitely helps. Um, I would look into like audio cue stuff for what you're describing. Seems like um, having triggers when audio plays or is in a certain range is definitely something Unity handles pretty well. So you definitely look into that. But I'm glad you're getting into it.
But I guess on that part, then not the on trigger for the audio part, but I guess I would have to set up 2 reference points like how I did in one game and basically tell the cars where I want them to move to
Mm-hmm.
once you hear that on trigger.
Yeah, that should be a regular transform, like going from point A to point B. Is it automatically driving like through obstacles?
No, so like think of traffic
Mm-hmm.
and think of cars being in the way of a fire truck.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, that can get pretty hairy pretty quickly.
Yeah,
I can think of it on that and see if I can suggest something. I'd have to think about how to do that.
yeah.
But yeah, that'll definitely be a challenge.
Yeah, that part, and then trying to. I think I found a tutorial on how to do the AI for like the time variance is easy for that. You just create a code for a time, and basically you have to get from point A to point B. Once you're
Mhm.
in that, it goes to like your final score and your level and all that other stuff.
Right.
My whole entire thing with um, the other part is, I guess, getting the AI to map where you're supposed to go.
Hmm. Yeah, like I said, when AI gets involved, they can get hairy pretty quick.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
there is some path finding things that you can do,
yeah,
but I'll take a look at that and see if I can help you out with that.
yeah,
'Cause
because I know
I
you.
know there are things out there. I just off the top of my head, I can't think of them. So let's see. I'll take a look for week 6. I'm pretty sure I have those. I can put up on there. Yeah. Oh, Unity crashes. That's interesting. Proof of concept. That's great. I'm really glad to see you guys progressing with it. And again, if there's any like specific mechanics or you need help figuring out how to do something, please let me know. I'd be happy to help you guys out. So, without any further ado, so again, I'm gonna kind of go through some more tutorial stuff. That's pretty much how I feel like the rest of the class is going to go. I'm just gonna have like little demonstrations and stuff of like how things work, and I guess it seems like you guys would rather have that than me going through that book. So I'm just gonna go through that. So let me get organized here. Rigging your character. I mean, if you know how to do it in a quick fashion, I'd say go for it. But I wouldn't spend all of your time rigging. As I said, I mean, if you can find something in the asset store that's already rigged and possibly animated, I would do that rather than worrying about all that stuff, you know, because you want to get into the mechanics of everything rather than worrying about your models. All right, got that going. Make sure I have the chat up here. Sorry, I got a million things on my screen right now. So yeah, this little scene here, it kind of goes through some different things. Kind of going over rigid bodies, colliders, and triggers. Sorry, 1 second here. Okay, cool. So I'm going to first look over here in this space. So we have a plane. That's basically our floor here, and we have a ball up in the air. And essentially, what I want to do is bounce this ball, right? It's fairly simple to do with the physics that Unity has built in. One of the first things that you have to do is create a physics material. So I have it here called bounce. So what you do, basically like you do with the regular material, you right click, create, and down here, physics material. Okay. And then these are basically all the settings that you can mess with. You can reduce the friction. Yeah, one for bounciness. These all go from 0 to 1. And then your bounce combine is basically how it bounces. So if I put this to average, the ball will drop and then just kind of dribble away. If I put it to maximum, it'll continuously bounce up in the air. And I'll show you that here in a second. Don't want to give away the whole thing. So we'll look at, I'll just put it off to the side right now because I don't want you to see the other one. It's already going to give some of this away. So you see it bounce. Don't worry about the colors just yet, but this is bouncing up in the air. Pretty simple, easy way to do it. So this is the script that goes on to bouncing the ball. Right, so the material allows you to have that kind of physics. Is this right? I'm just double checking this is the right script that I put on here. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that's a different one. What I have on here is a collision example. So there's two different types of ways you can interact with objects in Unity. So there's collision and then there's a trigger. So this one is basically going over how to manipulate things when an object collides with another object. So the code that I have, and we'll go into it in a second, essentially every time it bounces on the ground, here I'll go just to show you. Every time it hits the ground, the color is changing, just indicates that a collision event has taken place. And I mean, so let's see. So we have this script here, change color on collision. It's pretty simple. And it's right here. So again, a built-in function on collision, enter. and then the collision object that we want to use this on. First, we want to create a color. So this is a color object named randomly selected color equals get random color, which is this function down here. So this returns a color. So you can create a color using RGB, which is red, blue, green. And we're using a random class that Unity Engine has built in a range from 0 to 1. So basically, it's randomly generating a color for red, green, blue, and putting it together to create this color. All right. And then once we have that color, then we are setting the material of this component using renderer material color to that color. Makes sense. And again, this can be used for a lot of different applications. If something is bumping into something, or anytime an object needs something to happen when it collides with another object. So and like I said, we run it and it moves the color. Now, in order for this ball to bounce on this plane, first of all, these both should have rigid bodies to them. So you have to create a rigid body component for them. But the plane needs to have is kinematic on. So when you run it, I'll show you what happens when kinematic isn't on. The whole thing falls. So it's essentially ignoring regular gravity type of stuff. Okay, the box that's changing color is using a trigger event. And again, we touched on this before in another tutorial about the kind of like the pickup or the power up for colliding with something. So it's essentially the same thing, except instead of destroying the game object, we're actually just changing the color of it. And that can be found on change color on collision. Oh, I'm sorry, change color on trigger. And again, we're using that on trigger enter function that's built in. And we're pretty much doing the same thing. Randomly select the color, changing the color on that trigger rather than on the collision. Okay, and as you see, when the ball hits the cube, that's when the color is changing. If we go to the scene while this is running and we move that ball out of the way, you'll notice that the cube doesn't change color because it is not getting triggered. Also, another thing to note about this cube, in order for this to get set up, it has to be a trigger, just like before, right? So we have to select is trigger on here. And you also need to remove use gravity is kinematic, because being that this is a trigger, it will fall through the plane. So the reason that you would use a trigger versus a collider is that, like I said, when you want to use a collider when an object is hitting another object, like kind of a common sense thing, if it needs to bounce off of it or something needs to happen physically in the scene, rather than a trigger where a trigger can be transparent, it doesn't need to show, and an event happens. That's kind of the two biggest ways to differentiate the two. And it's really important to know when to use what in what situation, because you can save yourself some time by using the correct one. Okay. So I'm going to scooch my camera over to this guy. And we're doing a little something different here. Rather than using the built-in physics that Unity has, we're kind of going to make our own events happen within this little box. So I have a ball here, and then I made basically 4 cubes just to make walls. And put a light in there so you can see it. But essentially, we want this ball to kind of bounce around the 4 walls. And we do that with this ball bouncer script. Okay, so we have some serialized fields here. We have a vector3 initial velocity, pretty much for debugging, and it adds velocity when you start it up. Minimum velocity, that is, like the name suggests, the minimum velocity that the ball will go. Yeah, we have 2 other variables here, last frame velocity and rigid body, which we'll get into. So first, we're going to cache this this component here, the rigid body, because we are going to be using that throughout our code. This can probably help a little bit with performance if you just go ahead and cache the rigid body component into a variable like this. Because throughout the rest of the code, rather than having to say get component rigid body dot blah 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 blah, you can just say rb dot whatever you need to call for that component. So instead of saying rb velocity, this could also be a component velocity equals initial velocity. But again, this, if you do this several times, this could be this could impact your performance when you run the game. So always good to cache this component into a variable. Okay, and then the velocity of our rigid body equals the initial velocity, which we can set in the debugger. That's pretty much what it is doing on the on-enable. And the update, last frame velocity equals rb.velocity. It's essentially grabbing the velocity of the rigid body for the last frame. Yes, question.
So when I was using Unity yesterday, and I saw there was it was in some kind of custom setting where you can change references for stuff. So it was like LOL was laugh out loud, you know what I mean? So that whatever abbreviation you pump out of it, it'll turn into like a phrase. But it was in Unity.
So it was a variable that was shortened. I'm not too sure. I'm following.
It was, I mean, I'm looking for it now. I'll probably find it in like 10 minutes, but it just made it so that any inputs you had of a certain combination would turn out whatever you wanted it to. So if you typed in LOL, it would type in laugh out loud.
Yeah, I'm not sure what component that would be. If you can find it, yeah, let me know. I'd love to take a look at it. So again, we're using the on collision enter here for calling our bounds function, which we'll get to in a second, and then a contacts, which is, oh, it's just grabbing a contact point when a collision has been made. Yeah, so it's a vector 3 that gets grabbed. So here's our bounds function. It's pretty simple. We have a variable speed that is the velocity of the last frame, and it grabs the magnitude, which is the length. So then once we have that, we have to give it a direction, which is from a vector 3 dot reflect, and it'll grab the velocity, and then we use the collision normal, which is basically the last contact point. So we're basically reflecting it. And then we're changing the velocity based off of direction and I guess whichever is higher, either the minimum velocity or its speed. Yeah, essentially, it reflects it. It sends it back the same direction. So let me run it. Yeah, it does that because it bounced out because I was messing around with these variables. So believe, where are we here? This is on the Z. Let's check like 0.5. All right, fine. We won't use X at all. There you go, it's go bouncing around. Again, it's using the collision and detecting the velocity. Huh. I think it's because it got to the bottom. There was no, there's this Y velocity anymore, so it just went back and forth. But you can get the idea. It's just a matter of messing with the variables. It gains more speed with the velocity that's given between the X, Y, and Z coordinates, I believe. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, from the last frame of velocity. So it'll slow down or speed up. Yeah. Also, this might be messing it up. I'm just going to double check. It might do something. We'll see. If it bounces. Yeah. That might have been what was messing it up. So let's crank it to 20. That's still pretty slow. Oh, I see. This is the minimum velocity of that, and then I gotta, if I wanted to ramp it up a little bit more, I could do that.
Initial velocity x 0.
Well, I kind of wanted to get it bouncing around, just like in all different directions. I'm sure this thing's going to go flying out the window. It is going a bit faster, yeah. I think we'd have to throw in some more stuff to get negative values so that it would go both forwards and backwards. I think for right now, it just goes in one. Yeah, it just goes on the Z and Y plane, and then it'll start bouncing around. Yeah, again, that's because of the X, because we're not putting any positive values in it. It's just going to go that way. And because if we're using that that reflect, then it's basically taking it over after this initial. Any questions about that? It gets too close to the wall. I think it gets messed up. I wonder if we can just. Interesting. All right. Let's take about like a 10-minute break real quick. And I'll get into something else here in a bit. Yeah, we're just taking a 10-minute break. Be back in a couple. Hey guys, sorry about that. I'm just setting up the next meeting. Or I'm sorry, the next little tutorial here. Just, okay. Let me go ahead and show you guys what I've been working on here. I don't mind the errors. I'm pretty sure I know what's going on. So I'm next going to be talking about trying to create a health bar here. For some reason, I can't see the chat again. There we go, chat. So in order to do this, we're going to have to use a UI element called canvas. So in order to do that, right click, UI, and you go down here to canvas. And so when you create one, once you create it, you don't really see it at first, but a good way to define something in your scene, you select it in your hierarchy and hit F. It'll zoom out or find out wherever it is. But you can see it initially makes a giant one. So keep that in mind when you're doing this kind of stuff. So in order to set this up, first we have to scale this down. Let me scale. But before you scale it, so this will always stay here and you won't be able to really mess with it in your screen space or in game unless you change it from screen space to world space. So that'll allow you to see UI elements within your world space. Okay. And so now you'll be able to scale this down and, put it in your scene pretty easily. Again, you can hit F, and it'll zoom in and all that. So that's how you create a canvas element. So I have one here. And what I have is I added a image component to it. So first I needed a source image. I just had a background, which is basically just a black bar, just to have something. It is literally just a black rectangle. Can you set it back? I believe so, but I think your scaling and everything will get messed up. So it's essentially set up so that it'll be your entire screen and everything. It won't be within your world. So yeah, within your canvas, you want to create image script. Your source image, which is the black background, and then you can fill it with whatever color you want. I picked red because it's a health bar. Another thing you'll have to do, initially it's set to simple, I believe. You want to set it to filled, and it'll stretch. And I think it's just because the way that I have this background set up. But if you have an actual like UI, like background foreground setup, it should scale properly. I think it's just the way that I have mine here. And then you have your fill amount here, and you'll notice it'll go down and up with the fill amount because we have the fill origin to the left and the fill method is horizontal. Oh yeah, I think this is set usually to like radial or something initially. So you want to switch that to horizontal, and that'll give you the slider here to do the fill amount. So first, to set this up, we need to make a health class, and I have that here. We have a serialized field called max health, which is the maximum health that the bar has, which is 100. And then we have another variable called current health, which the variable in which your current health is stored. And then we are creating an event here that is an action called on health % change. So, yeah, go ahead, Jose.
Can you just describe to me a little bit about serialized field?
Oh, sure. Serialized field, all that is it lets you see it within your in Unity, so you can adjust that on the fly. So if you put that script onto an object, you'll see that it has that variable on there, and you mess around with it. That's how in the other example, I was able to have the ball. Yeah, the change. No, there was something on here that had it. Oh, I think it was this one. Yeah, I was able to have these XYZ initial velocities and the minimum velocity is because I set those as serialized variables that I can set within the Unity engine. Okay. So in order to create this this public event action, which we'll be using later, you have to add in the actual system namespace directory, because it's within that, not these specific directories. So that's just something to keep in mind when you create these events. We're using the onEnable function. So current health equals max health. So essentially we're saying when this object is enabled, we're setting everything to 100. It's not saving the variable from later. We're creating a function called modify health, which takes in an integer amount. So current health plus equals amount. All right. So essentially we talked about this before. Plus equals means current health equals current health plus the amount. So, and keep in mind that amount can be a positive number or a negative number. So we'll see that down here. I'm sure you figured it out by now. And then we're also calculating a percent using a float. So a float current percent equals the current health divided by the maximum health. Being that these are integers initially, we have to cast them to a float, and that's how you cast them in order to set this variable, which is a float. Okay, and then on the update, we have this. We're grabbing a space bar just for the sake of this tutorial. So every time we hit the space bar, we're calling the modify health, and we're giving it a -10. So that -10 would be the amount. So essentially, it would be the current health plus equals a -10. So essentially, we're subtracting 10 from current health. It's a little weird to think about that we're, throwing a negative number and then we're adding it to it, but So we have that, and then we have the script for the actual health bar. So this is what I was working on before. We have the foreground image, which I probably don't even need right at this moment, and then a serialized field for the update speed seconds. Yeah, I'm hoping I get this done soon. But so we're grabbing the parent game object, which would have the health class associated with it. Do you need to serialize two fields in this instance? Being that I'm not using the foreground image currently, probably not. And the update speed of seconds, I believe you probably need that one. We'll go through it in a second. But you can serialize as many variables as you need. It doesn't need to be 2. It can be as many as you want. So this is, again, a preval function, which I believe is when, I couldn't tell you the difference between wait and start. Oh, I see. Start is only called when a script is enabled. Awake, I believe, is when the actual program starts up. Keep them all under 1. Don't believe so. Maybe if you do commas, like if you had more of the same. Give it a shot here. And X, Y, and Z. I believe this already has it on there somewhere. Oh, it's giving me errors. That's why it's not loading. But I didn't finish this yet. Yeah, so you could do it. I believe you can do it in commas, and I don't think it's one after the other. So if I did private int x and then private int y, don't believe it does. Yeah, it's only showing x for that. So you have to put serialized field for each variable, unless they're the same type, and you can just do commas, right? So always good practice just to do it. Go ahead, Jose, you had a question.
Okay, so as I'm messing around with my controller, right? First thing I'm doing, I'm getting him to move around, and then maybe I'll have like an input for a firearm, and then an input for damage and all this, right? And since I'm gonna be doing these in steps, instead of like, because once I get something right, man, I feel so accomplished, right? I don't want to like mess it up again. So like, is it okay if I have multiple update fields in a script?
No, I don't even think it'll allow you to.
Okay.
Yeah, you should keep everything all in one update. And that would probably just be easier to handle in terms of, you know, handling your code, because then you don't know what's happening at what time and everything. So yeah, it's probably good practice just to keep it all in one function, even if it allows you to, which I don't think it does.
Another noob thing. Like sometimes when I'm typing in into the program that we're using, I don't remember off the top of my head, but some of the words don't light up.
Oh, you mean it automatically?
Like private void would just say private void. It wouldn't be blue.
Really? That's interesting. It might be because of errors previously. So like, we do y or something like that. It'll still let you do it.
Yeah, because I had an experience where I was like writing a script, nothing was coming up, so I just left it alone. I opened up another script and it was working fine. So like I'm using the same program, same instance of the program. One script is not showing anything like being recognized, and then the other one is.
I mean, it seems to me it's either a formatting issue or an error, because sometimes errors will pretty much halt anything else, like any formatting that goes on, and that can really mess you up. So it's like,
okay, and I guess like just one more noob question, and this one's pretty bad, but when I go to my script in Unity and I double click it, it wants to open up in mono develop. How do I just change that setting so it won't look
so I
for
believe
there
that's
anymore?
in the project settings. Oh yeah, so actually leave edit preferences, external tools. So once you see external script editor, yours probably says mono develop here. And if the thing is with Unity is that it works better, or Visual Studio works better when you install Visual Studio with Unity. Because I think there's a whole bunch of packages and stuff that's really integrated into Visual Studio. So during the installation is the best time to put Visual Studio in there. That was kind of the problem that I was running into initially, was that for some reason breakpoints weren't working, and you know I was having a whole bunch of issues, is because the packages that Unity needs to work with Visual Studio wasn't correctly connected. So it's important to install Visual Studio with Unity and then go into here and swap it to Visual Studio. Alternatively, if instead of double clicking it, so I mean, it's not exactly a solution, but it's, so say you have some script here that you've just added, if you go back into Unity, it'll say, hey, there's some changes between your Unity project and here. Do you want to reload? You hit reload all, and it'll pop up in your solution.
Okay, and just one more little thing. So I was checking out other tutorials on YouTube, and this one guy he had a specific interface for his Unity. So he wasn't using like a C# script per se. It was like it was coming up on the right hand side of the screen, and there were fields he could fill in that were pseudocode, and then it was processing it on its own. And I think, what was he using? It was like Xcode, and he was using like a XNF file extension or something.
Yeah. Xcode, I believe, is for developing for mobile, for Apple products, like developing specifically for Mac and everything. I believe you could do that. It probably looks different just because it's not C#. I don't know if it's exactly pseudocode or not. But yeah, I believe that you can have it within Unity all mashed in. I think like even fairly soon. Yeah, I thought you were able to edit within there. But I think, yeah, there's probably plugins or something that allows you to edit within the inspector and all that stuff.
Should we just stay away from that for now?
I would. I feel like it's just easier to use Visual Studio. It gives you more space, number one. I really wouldn't want to work in this little tiny window, or even expanding it seems kind of weird to me.
Okay.
But I mean, it allows you to, I don't know, see all of the scripts. But overwrite. And I like tabbing through these rather than going through the editor and all that stuff. I personally like it. I'm sure that you could probably find a plugin for Unity to do all that stuff. And if you feel comfortable with it, then sure, you can go with it. I just think Unity or Visual Studio has a lot to offer. And I feel like a lot of those plugins that allow you to change within the Unity editor, I don't think it gives you the same like formatting things that Visual Studio does. Like this autofills like crazy, and auto formats and everything. So I don't know. I like it. Hopefully that answers your question. Okie doke. So we're starting in this health bar class to make the changes that we need to based on, well, take that back. I believe it changes the amounts in health. So let's go down here to change to percent, which is an IE numerator. And if you remember, this is the type of function that it fragments large pieces of data and allows you to pause an iteration with it, like basically a process. So if there's some process that needs to happen that may take, that you need to pause all other operations, that's what you use the IE numerator for. So yeah, I don't know if this will work without a foreground, but we can run through it. So we have this float, pre-change percent, which is what the percentage of the foreground image is before we do any changes to it. And you grab that from foreground image.fill amount, which is that fill amount slider that we saw before. And elapsed, I believe it's just time. Yeah. So while elapsed is less than the update speed of seconds. So I guess we can change, the speed of the change within here. So while it is less than the update speed of seconds, we add time at delta time, basically the change in time to elapsed, and then we fill that amount. Lerp is basically, like it says, interpolates between A and B by the time t. So flow A, which is the percentage. I'm getting my variables mixed up here. Yeah, the fill amount of the foreground image. The percent of whatever is coming into this function, and then the elapsed time divided by the update speed seconds. And again, this is called, I believe, when you want to pause the iteration. And then after this process takes place, and we fill the amount with the percentage that we're looking for. So essentially, this is doing the physical change to the percentage bar, and then we are setting the percentage, the fill amount to that percentage. Just 1 second here. I believe that's what we need to get things going. Oh, she was yelling at me before. On health percent change. Okie doke. So coming back to here. So we need, typically you would have a character, but I'm gonna have my little capsule guy. So this is my player, and then we need to parent the canvas to the player. Right, so hopefully when you have the player, yep, that moves with it. I believe the player also needs the health. Canvas has the health bar script, so let's give this a shot. So help with the camera. Let's move. Camera. Boom. Make the canvas child of the camera. You could, but the thing is, so I would assume that being that it was a child of the camera, it'd be a type of UI that you'd always want displayed that's essentially what the screen space overlay is for. So you don't have to parent it to the camera. It would just be the entire screen space. Or screen space camera. So if you wanted to do that, sure. But I'm pretty sure overlay is usually the standard. You should be able to. Oh, maybe not. Oh, geez. But at any rate, yeah, you can attach this to whatever you want. Like I said, we will get into more UI intensive stuff later. Probably not next class, but the one after, going more in detail of how to set things up. So on the subject of next class, I'm thinking next class we get into 2D development rather than, because I'm sure some of you want to use 2D objects rather than 3D, or use 3D objects in a 2D plane to make like a 2.5D type of situation. Yeah. So I'm gonna get into that next week. Just setting it up, how a 2D project is different. It's similar, but it's a lot of layers and stuff. Yeah. We'll get into that stuff. But yeah, the reason I go into 3D first is it's kind of that's the basis. I mean, Unity didn't have that 2D project when it first was created. A lot of people just used the 3D assets and created 2D games out of that. So, but now that they have a project that you can create in 2D, it just sets it up so that you can have your 2D layers and everything like that. But again, we'll get into that next week. And then the week after that, that's probably when I'll get into UI stuff. So let's see, hopefully, yeah, I think it's because I don't have a foreground set up for this. Checking my notes here. Sorry, guys, give me 1 second. Oh, I see. Hold on. So we're gonna rename this background. I'm gonna remove this. I'm gonna add it here. What world? Oh, that's because. Let's try that again. So, all right, create canvas. Well, I should be able to just copy this one. Cool. I'm gonna rename it background. Do it again. Parent those to this canvas. And an image, which will be background. Which you're not really doing anything with. Okay. And foreground image. Right. There's a lot of setup with UI. That's kind of why I wanted to take a whole class just to go over it, because there's a lot. It can be finicky a lot of the time. Am I going crazy, or did I not have image type on here? Oh, maybe it's only on this one that I can do it. Oh, let me see. No, I'm supposed to be able to. So you guys have to see me mess around with this setup. I usually don't do UI stuff that often. Source image. Maybe. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Filled. Horizontal. Oh, we got something going there. And it's like one of those things where everything has to come out right. But I think you guys kind of get the idea. Like once you have the different layers that are set up within this canvas, essentially you're changing the foreground fill each time. So when you hit spacebar, that fill gets reduced. I think it's just a matter of fiddling with the different parented objects and stuff like that. Yeah, I'll fiddle around with this a bit, and I'll again, like I have been doing the past couple of weeks. I'll upload the finished product, and I'll explain what's going or why it wasn't working. But I don't want to waste your guys' time with this. Any other questions regarding this stuff? I did have some other stuff, but I mean, I think you guys probably rather want to focus on working on your games and stuff.
I mean, what was your other stuff? I mean, there's still time in the class. We're
here. Sure. I guess.
Sorry, guys.
Well, no. Yeah. I mean, you're right. I don't want to deprive you guys of anything, but I mean, the other stuff is a bit more involved. Like I wanted to talk about ragdoll physics, but that would require me like getting a character, and it's like a lot of finicky stuff on my end of just getting all that stuff working correctly.
Okay.
I can try getting into it.
It is up to you though.
Yeah. You know, I have it all written down. I just let me see how involved this is. I mean, really, ragdoll physics may not be every bit, like no real reason to mess around with that stuff. I don't think anybody's really gonna use it. It's just kind of a fun thing to do. Yeah, unless there's something that people really want to see, I'll probably just stick around. If you guys have any specific questions or something you want to work through, I'll be here. But I think as far as like, you know, ready tutorials, I'm gonna call it for right now. But like I said, if there's something specific you guys want to see, you need to let me know. I'll be here the whole time. So. I do have AI as one of the things to go over. Depending on how long the 2D stuff goes, I might do it after that. Like just simple things, not anything complicated. I might go over that. Like it's bigger than an hour, less than, you know, less than like 2 hours or something. So I might hold that off until, or yeah, maybe I'll do it after UI next week or after 2D. I'll fill it in with one of those slots, but it's just, you know, different AI states and stuff like that. I might go through ray tracing, like for guns and stuff, but I don't think anybody really has any guns or anything. But again, those are kind of the ideas that I had throwing around. If you want to see other tutorials, just let me know. It can be specific to your project if you need it to be. But yeah, I'm here if anybody needs anything or wants to go over anything. But going through just real quick. I think I did see everybody that was not here before. Yeah. Still don't see Jennifer. If you're there, just yell at me. Yeah. This morning I saw Talia, but I guess I didn't. Yeah, Talia and Jennifer were the only ones that I don't have. So anyway, you guys have a good night. I'll see you next week. And like I said, any questions throughout the week, any concerns or anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll be here. Like I said, I'm going to be sitting around here for until 8 o'clock. So, alrighty, take care.